Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome to the messengers in our home. Hello, dear friends of Kardec Radio. Welcome back to the messengers in our home. My name is Franziska Fehrenbach, and tonight we're going to talk about chapter 25, Her Prayer's Effects. Hello, Mackenzie.
Hi, Franziska, and hello, dear friends. Welcome back to another chapter of the messengers in our home.
As usual, before we start, we would like to invite you for our opening prayer. Elevating our thoughts to the higher spheres. Dear Mother, Father God, Creator of the universe and of our yet small hearts, we are so grateful for every day with all its possibilities and opportunities to learn and to grow, and especially to start afresh whenever we have fallen down. We thank you for being gathered in your name all around the world, wherever we are and whenever we listen to this program. Thank you, dear God, for our lives, for the challenges, and especially for this knowledge about what expects us in the afterlife, so that we can be awake right here and right now already, and also prepare ourselves for our journey back one day. We thank Andre Louis and all the other good spirits for sharing their knowledge with us, for giving us the insights of what happens on the other side, and how our life here is connected to what is going to happen to us in the afterlife. We would like to welcome the spiritual benefactors of Kardec Radio and thank them for their constant love and support, for their inspiration, for their motivation, and for helping us to keep on going. And with your permission, we would like to start our meeting tonight. So be it. Let us now listen to the reading of chapter 25. Enjoy.
Chapter 25. Her Prayer's Effects. The lights from the prayer flooded the huge ward. A peace-filled glow now pulsated in everything. It was gentle and radiant, and very different from the artificial lighting. The shiny bubbles that fell from us multiplied in the air as if they were undergoing some mysterious process of division. They continued falling on the inanimate and rigid bodies, giving the impression of penetrating their innermost cells. I was dumbfounded. I had never witnessed phenomena like this in No Solar. Besides, I concluded, I had received the magnetic aid for increasing my perceptions only a few hours before the journey. The light grew and spread out in an extraordinary spectacle. We abandoned the meditative posture that we had been using in order to concentrate our strength and to emit our vibrational energies. Nevertheless, our bodies remained enveloped in a huge radiant sphere. As the overall silence continued, I noticed that the light from the prayer was becoming clearer and more intense. Just as in Anna's case, I began to see that, in addition to their death masks, all those miserable skeletons displayed dark nuclei that displayed a variety of different forms. The luminous bubbles continued to fall, but now, as if guided by an intelligent will, almost all of them were converging on the lifeless foreheads. Then I saw something unheard of and inconceivable. The mummies, I couldn't think of another label for those sleeping brothers and sisters, began to show signs of life. Some of the wretches began emitting anguishing groans, while others, like somnambulists about to wake up, were speaking out loud and describing the nightmares that were tormenting them. Many were moving their feet and hands as if making efforts to flee from their sorrow-filled sleep. I was extremely surprised at seeing that two of them, some ways away, had actually gotten up. I remembered them both as having been among those who had received all the treatments that had been offered, including the healing breath. They looked at us like lunatics who had suddenly awakened, and then broke into a run, horror-stricken, looking like zombies. I was astonished that no one showed the least inclination to follow them, and when I instinctively tried to, Alfredo stopped me. Don't worry, they would be bitterly surprised if they were told that they had been sleeping for such a long time amongst mummies. They think they're dreaming, and it's better that they do. They won't be able to get past our fortifications and will ask for help at other facilities, where they will be received for appropriate treatment. We remained silent for a few more minutes, and I noticed that the lights were slowly going out. The corpses returned to their previous immobility. Ismalia stated that our prayer service had ended, and after giving the luminous signal announcing to the workers the end of their duties, the administrator approached us, exclaiming, "Many thanks for your fraternal cooperation. That was indeed a beautiful intercessory service. No one has gotten up in quite a few days." Aniceto noticed our perplexity and said to Vicente and me, "You have seen that prayer work in the material realm is more important than you can imagine. There is no prayer that doesn't receive an answer. Prayer, the daughter of love, is not only supplication, it is communion between the Creator and His creatures, thus comprising the most powerful magnetic influx known. While we are on the matter, however, I might add that malevolent prayer also has enormous influential potential. Every time a spirit assumes such a mental attitude, a communication link is established between it and the beyond. If prayer is centered on the divine good, then wherever it comes from, it heads toward the beyond vertically in search of the blessings of the superior life. But we must warn you that evil spirits respond to other evil spirits on the lower planes, and they intertwine mentally with each other. We must stress, however, that every impersonal prayer addressed in the name of God to the supreme forces of the good receives an immediate response. Powerful elements that vitalize our inner world flow down from the highest spheres upon those who pray during these blessed tasks, building divine hope within us, and then, in our intense desire to serve with the Lord, they flow outward, saturated with our personal magnetism. Attempting to materialize his thought to make it easier for us to understand, he stressed, "You both saw the elements I'm referring to falling upon us, and you observed their outward flow, carrying the light of each one of us on behalf of our sleeping and suffering brothers and sisters. The Most High granted all of us equal portions of power to help, but we spread it according to our individual ability and coloration. Ismailia, whose sentiments are broader and more universalistic than ours, was able to receive the divine aid more clearly and was able to distribute it more abundantly and effectively. There is a profound lesson in this. As I already said, the Father visits his needy children through the children who seek to understand him. We can't abuse the Lord the way we abuse our human parents. That is, he does not live to satisfy our personal whims. He would never come in person to dry the tears of the needy who weep as the result of having forgotten the divine laws. Those in need must turn to him instead. But he always assists people of goodwill through good people who have been schooled in the divine house of goodness. All our reasonable desires and impulses are answered by the paternal blessings of the Eternal One. Even though we may wallow in our tears and afflictions, we are never left helpless. We must only stress that answers from God tend to become greater and more direct to the degree that our merit increases, and we need to realize that for such answers, God uses all those who carry the light of goodness within them, or who have merit and confidence to offer aid in his name. Aniceto's explanations opened up new arenas of meditation for me, but he had not finished the lesson, and after a long pause, he concluded, "Since you have joined me in a course of helpful service, I hope that you will make the most of this lesson. You may have noticed that in these words there are 1,980 sleeping patients. They all receive regular daily nourishment and medication, but only 400 are being given specialized nourishment and medication because they seem to be more likely to improve. Of these 400, only 2/3 have shown themselves capable of receiving magnetic passes. Many cannot receive energized water for now. Very few received the healing breath, and only 2 actually got up. But even so, they were still in a deeply disturbed state. Now that you have begun your work of fraternal cooperation, don't forget this lesson. Let us all do good without being anxious about it. Let us sow it always and everywhere, but let's not get stuck by demanding results. The farmer can sow his seed at will and wherever he wants, but he must realize that the germination, growth, and results belong to God. Tonight we are going to discuss chapter 25, Her Prayer's Effects. Her? Yeah, if you've been following us, you know that we are talking about the prayer that Ismailia made and conducted with all of us together last week when we read and commented and made comments on chapter 24, right? So as we finished last week's chapter, we asked ourselves, because we hadn't seen any special effects of her prayer. Well, we saw that while she was praying and everybody was following the prayer, following the rhythm, following the idea, really putting their deep thoughts and deep feelings into what they were saying and thinking, we saw those special white flakes falling from heavens and falling on all those who were praying. And right after that, Andre describes that from those who were praying, they were emitting some bubbles that were coming out of their bodies towards those who were sleeping, which Andre usually calls mummies, and he says it again here in this chapter. And all those bubbles were colorful. And he also mentioned that some of those bubbles were like more powerful from certain spirits than from other spirits. And naturally he mentions Ismalia's bubbles are being of a more radiant glow and going towards basically all of those spirits who were sleeping. And some of the other workers, like himself, Andre, like Vicente, Aniceto, well, they were smaller bubbles with specific colors and so on. So, and I would also like to remind everybody that last week we talked a little bit about this glowing, about the light, about the artificial light. And that's basically how we start this chapter 25 with Andre mentioning once again the lights of the environment, the light of the prayer. And he also mentions the artificial lighting of that environment, which, as I already said, we mentioned last week. So I'm just going to read the two first sentences of this chapter when Andre says, "The lights from the prayer flooded the huge ward. A peace-filled glow now pulsated in everything. It was gentle and radiant, and very different from the artificial lighting." So it is interesting that he starts with this mentioning of the light once again. And it is very interesting, at least to me, and I hope that you find it interesting too, that he is making this point for us to really pay attention, because sometimes and I'm going to use this lighting, artificial lighting, and the lights from the prayer metaphorically, as I did last week, by using, for example, okay, I'm going to watch a movie, or I'm going, even better, I'm going to the Spiritist Center, right? And I'm going to watch a speaker that I really love, that it has the power of words and really touches people and so on. So if I look at that experience of going to a Spiritist Center or of going to a special talk, and I see all that light that comes from that person, right, that's speaking there, or the light that comes from the place where I am, the Spiritist Center, right? If I compare it to light, comparing that light that's coming from that person to me, that can be said in a certain way that light is some sort of artificial lighting, because it is coming from the exterior, right? It is coming from the outside. It's not, I won't be able to be there 100% of the time, right? And that light might be very, very far away, and I won't be able to see it. So in a certain sense, it can be turned off. However, the light of the prayer, which is the light that comes from the inside, from myself, right? The light that I have the power to turn on, is something that's inside of myself. And if I pray, and that's what Andre is saying here, right? The lights from the prayer flooded the huge word. So it was a collective prayer, right? Those lights were turned on by myself, right? From all those spirits who were together there. And then, because I was able to turn those lights on, right, I can clearly see how the light comes. And on that sense, it's not coming from the inside, so we could using my own metaphor, right? A person could say, oh, but this would also be coming from the outside. Yes, but it's a reflection of what I did on the inside, right? Differently than just by being at a place and expecting the light to be there, right? Here is I am doing something actively. In this case, and in this chapter's case, when I talk about the prayer, it is as if I'm turning the switch on so that I am able to control the light that I will be able to receive, instead of just being in a certain place and expecting the light to be on, which would be a person speaking to me, a movie that I'm watching. I have the power to use sometimes, and effectively also, the light that's coming from the outside. But if I don't have it inside of myself, this power to really be able to shine light from myself, it is much, much harder. And then that's why Andre starts by telling us about the light, because the light that comes from the prayer is very different from the artificial lighting that comes from the outside without us having really not, I wouldn't say a control, but really without knowing what that light is about, without knowing what is generating that light. And if I'm praying for the good, I know what kind of light is coming and what kind of light I can receive. So all the lights from those prayers, right, are illuminating the environment, illuminating the words, and also those bubbles are touching each one of those spirits who were sleeping at the time. And naturally, Andre is describing this, and he says, and he reminds himself, oh, he never saw this before, but maybe it was because he had received, at that time in No Solar, he had not received that magnetic aid that increased his perceptions, and also Vicente's perceptions as well. So now he is seeing these things, maybe because he got better perceptions due to that aid that he received. So it is interesting that he makes this comment, because a person could have said, oh, but why didn't he see it before, right? Was it not there? Now he's just making this self up, making this thing up. And he said, well, no, they told me that I would need to receive this aid so that I would be able to see it more, so that I could relate it more, so that I could, see it more, so that I could tell other people how these things happen. And as things progress, he says that, well, they were all in a specific posture. And remember, it's not only about the posture, it is also, right? If I'm at a marriage, and the marriage is, you have to wear certain kinds of clothes and so on. So we try to fit and follow that same pattern, right? So when we are in a prayer service, right, why not have a specific posture, right, to behave, accordingly to what that place is. If I'm at a beach, for example, I'm going to wear, clothes that are connected to being at a beach, right? If I am going to see a judge, for example, I have to dress appropriately and behave accordingly as well. So here's the same thing. They were praying, right? And they followed that, what we talked about last week, the rhythm, right? The thoughts, and they probably had a specific posture. He doesn't say any specific posture, meaning kneeling down or putting their hands together, but a meditative posture, meaning a calm posture, a tranquil posture. If a person needs to be sitting down to pray or wants to kneel down, what's the problem? There is no problem. Other than just be respectful to the place and to everybody that's there. So they had they got out from those postures, but he continued to see those energies being emitted by all those people, all those spirits who were praying. And those bubbles were going through those who were sleeping. The silence continued, right? But as those lights were becoming as those lights were becoming clearer and more intense, he began to see that those spirits, those mummies, as he says, and he says that he can't think of another label for those sleeping brothers and sisters, he started to see something else other than just the mask, something else other than just the outside or the exterior of those spirits, right? He saw the dark nucleus of each one of them, and they all had different forms, maybe and probably showing how disturbed the mind of those spirits are and how bad they are feeling at that specific moment, And naturally, this dark nucleus that he mentions here is also for us to create that image of how powerful those mental negative images are for ourselves, right? So that we put ourselves and remove from ourselves, all the light that we have, and we become darkened without that light. And then he continues. He says, well, those bubbles continue to fall, and as if guided by an intelligent will, which is interesting that he mentions this. Almost all of those bubbles were converging on the lifeless foreheads, right? And in Spiritism, we say that the perispirit is connected to our body, molecule by molecule, right? Cell by cell. So our spiritual body is connected to ourselves, every single molecule. But the last and the most powerful connection from the spirit to our body and to our perispirit is where it's in the brain, right? Where we have the control, right? It's the motherboard or the CPU of the whole body. Everything is important, but naturally there must be something that controls everything, and the brain is that part of our body. So the forehead, right, where we enter in what connects to the brain, is where those energies and those bubbles were going towards. And he says that as if guided by an intelligent will. And I'd like to point out here that while many of us can understand this sentence by saying that maybe it was God or maybe it were the spirits who were putting those bubbles connected and going towards their foreheads, or where the place where the spirit controls everything. I like to think that since we have our free will, and this free will was given to us by God, and the law of God is written down in our consciences, although we have, in the cases of these mummies here, we have forgotten God or the goodness of the world, that God is our Father and only wants our goodness, all the best for us. We may have forgotten on the exterior, but interiorly we still have that small seed of light, right, that God puts into us. That's where I will, even if I don't want to sometimes, that's where I need to receive the light that will make that seed grow one day. And this is this intelligent will that comes from me, that seed that God planted within ourselves, and where I can receive some light from the outside. So it is as if it's driven naturally to there, but it's not because somebody on the outside is driving. Sometimes it's myself, right there. I'm pulling it to me, and it is from there from that forehead, from that cone in front of my forehead, that I'm gonna suck, right? Those energies, and that's basically what was happening there, right? We were, those spirits were, getting those energies from that specific area, which is the one that controls the whole body, and that really sucks or gets the good energies to our spiritual body. Once when those descriptions, the description of Andre of everything that's happening, once he gets a full picture, and once he keeps looking at everything, he sees that all those creatures, or some of those creatures, were starting to show signs of life, and they were groaning, and others were about to wake up and speaking out, like when we are sleeping, and then we start talking in our sleep. And some of them were describing what's happening and what was tormenting them. Some of them were trying to just walk, as if they were trying to run away from what their nightmares might have been. And out of those almost 2,000 spirits, he saw 2 of them. Out of 2,000, almost 2 of them actually got up. Right? And while looking at those, he saw that those that got up were among those who had received all the treatments that had been offered, including the healing breath. And those spirits who got up looked at all the other spirits who were there to help, and they were very afraid of what was going on, and then they started to run. And he says, and he describes horror-stricken and looking like zombies. So it is Andre's description. And he says, okay, nobody is moving to talk to those spirits. So I want to go there. I want to do something for those spirits. And when he tries to do that, Alfredo stops him, and he says, well, Andre, don't worry. They just awake. They just got up. They don't know what's going on. They don't know that they've been sleeping for a long time, and they still think that they are sleeping, that they are still dreaming. And for now, because of the situation that they're in, it is better that they do this, right? We have to remember that this is not a physical hospital, right? So they cannot get hurt in the way a patient here in a hospital can get hurt if the person starts running around. So it is a spirit. It won't be able to get hurt. So they leave them be, right? And Alfredo says, well, and they won't be able to go farther, away from where we are. They won't be able to go cross our fortifications. And there will be a way in a moment when they will stop and ask for help, and they will receive appropriate treatment. But that must come from them, right? It's not from ourselves. It's, I want to do something. I want to ask for help. And here, it just reminds me of Andre in the Umbral, in the beginning of the first book of this series, No Solar. Right? He was there. He was suffering. He couldn't die again. He was already dead, quote unquote. But people were calling him names, and he was suffering for a long, long time, until the day when he got tired of it and remembered his mother, remembered the prayer that she taught him, and he decided to pray. And once he started to pray, he doesn't know how long it passed, how much time it has passed. Somebody came and rescued him, Clarencio and some other friends. So that's basically what's happening here. This group of spirits is not there to grab those spirits and do whatever they want to the ones who are sleeping and that awake. They are there to help them awake, and once they awake, right? They get up. They will some in this case specifically, they ran and said, "Oh, leave them be, let them run, let them feel what they're feeling right now. When it will come a time when they will stop and they will ask for help. Once they ask for help, there will be help for them, and then we can take care of them once again." And then there was silence when it happened, and when this happened, the lights of the prayer were slowly going out, and all those mummies, all those corpses returned to their previous immobility. So they received what they needed to receive for that day, and that was it for that specific work that they were doing. Ismalia said that the prayer service ended, and then Vicente said that, well, we are done for the day now. And he says, "Many thanks for your fraternal cooperation. That was indeed a beautiful intercessory service. No one has gotten up in quite a few days." So it's a work of time, right? Of dedication. You never know what's going to happen. You never know how it's going to happen. But it's not for us to say when it's going to happen, right? We need to keep working. We need to do our best to really, put the best efforts, the purest intentions, thinking about God, bending to God's will, and say, well, it's I can sow the seeds, but germination, it's not for me to say when, how specifically, so it will come when it needs to come. And that's, well, I'm pulling myself ahead a few minutes here on what Aniceto will say, but we can clearly see how important and how interesting these explanations can come for us, right? Because what Alfredo is telling us here, some days we don't, we do our prayers, we do our service, and nobody gets up, nobody wakes up, and what can we do, right? Are we going to be discouraged by it? No, we know that one time there will be a day when all those spirits will wake up, right? Will stand up and walk again. But it's not for us, right? What we need to do is keep doing our work. And as we come to more or less halfway through this chapter, I'd like to remind everyone that it would be really interesting for all of you, if you already don't have the book, to get the book, right? To follow us, to follow the reading, to go ahead with us, taking your notes, and send us your comments. We will be here, me, Francisca, go to Kardec Radio's website, kardecradio.com, and there you will find the contact page, and then you can send us email, and we will be glad to read part of the email, to read the question, and maybe if we know the answer, give you the answer right away. If we don't know the answer, then we will contact other people who study more than we do, who know more than we do, and we will be able to put the answer up for you. So feel free to contact us at any time. And once again, get the book. It is interesting that we are together reading and making these comments, on Kardec Radio, but it goes deeper once we, instead of just listening from the outside, we really take these lessons and we study them by ourselves, and then we can, like we were saying before, right, getting this light, not from my voice, right, in this case me, Mackenzie, or from Francisca's voice specifically, but that we can get these lessons from ourselves, right, from the inside, so that we can be the light and don't have to wait all the time for the light of others, right, to shine on the path that I'm going through. But going back here, coming back to the chapter, we have that once Alfredo said that, Aniceto noticed the perplexity of Andre and Vicente, and he says, and Aniceto comes to explain how here, naturally, not only to Andre and Vicente, but to us. And he will have a full reflection here, a larger reflection on how the importance of prayer and how that prayer or how a prayer can impact our lives and the lives of the others who are around us. And he starts by saying that you have seen that prayer work in the material realm is more important than you can imagine. And we have seen the power of prayer, right? To ourselves and to other people. We have these stories that we all read, and once we pray, it gets stronger and stronger. And he says, and he continues, there is no prayer that doesn't receive an answer. Prayer is a daughter of love. It is not only a supplication, it is a communion between the Creator and His creatures. It is as if I'm really, really, really getting in contact with God, right? With the Creator. And there's no more powerful magnetic influx known to the spirits and to us is this communion, right? When we get into communion with the Creator. However, and he points out that because this is a magnetic influx, right? Because this is a connection that is established between a spirit and God, or between a spirit and another spirit, right? He mentioned something that's rarely spoken of, which is a malevolent prayer. And Aniceto makes it very clear, right? A malevolent prayer also has enormous influential potential. So naturally, and we need to ask ourselves, what is a malevolent prayer, right? Maybe you should have a different name. We shouldn't call a prayer malevolent, right? But since we don't have a specific name for that, we call it a prayer or an invocation or a desire that something happens. Instead of wishing good or thanking for something good that happened, we would do the opposite, right? We can thank for something bad that happened towards another person, or we can ask that this bad thing happened to that other person. And the question here is, are we into that? And this is a question that we need to ask ourselves. If we broaden the idea of what a prayer is, because some people, when we mention prayer, we tend to think of that moment when we stop thinking about anything or everything that surrounds us, and then we stop and just think about that prayer, and we think only of this, of being a prayer. But throughout the day, our thoughts, right, the way that I'm thinking, the way that I am behaving, and wishing things for my day, wishing things for other people, these are also types of prayers. The question is, how many times throughout the day my thoughts or my prayers are good prayers, are this communion between the Creator and ourselves, or am I using those thoughts, those moments where I'm thinking, to wish bad things to other people? This is what Aniceto is reminding us of here. If our thoughts and our prayers are of that kind, the same way that a good thought and that a good prayer has an enormous potential to help, the bad thoughts, the malevolent prayers, also have enormous influential potential. Because every time we assume a specific mental attitude, a communication link is established between that thought and that person to another spirit, or to the afterlife, as he puts it here, to the beyond. If it's a good thought, it will go and ascend to good spirits who are listening and expecting these good thoughts so that they can go and come and rescue. However, if I start thinking about bad things, and there are some bad spirits or some malevolent spirits around us, they will not feel obliged, but they will like those prayers and maybe help you achieve what you're thinking. And unfortunately, that has consequences also, right? And I can become obsessed, I can become attached to those spirits. Something really bad can happen to other people, and I'm just increasing the evil thoughts on the world, right? So it is very powerful, and it is very interesting that we have to pay more attention to what we are thinking throughout our days. So because of what we are thinking, we are going to be connected to those kinds of minds that float around us, right? That float, quote unquote here, right? That live while we think that they are dead, and they are not dead. They are completely alive. And he also mentions, just to complement this, that there's also the kind of impersonal prayer, which is I'm not doing a prayer for a specific reason. I'm doing a prayer, it's like a prayer for the goodness of the world. And also that kind of prayer reaches, right, those supreme forces of the good, and then they will be able to use that prayer as a tool to help specific problems. So it is very important for us that the more we look at the world and we think about the world in a positive way, the better we help the world to become a better place. Naturally, it is not only about thinking. It is also about doing, and I would say much more importantly about doing and putting your hands to work instead of just, laying down and praying, and that will not help you get up, right? So we need to get up. Well, it can help us getting up, but if I don't have the will to go there and do something, it's not the prayer that will do it for me. I need to put my hands into work. I need to, put one foot in front of the other and walk towards the goal that I need to and that I want to achieve. But the prayer gives us more energy so that we can really stay on focus if we want the divine hope within ourselves. And that's why Aniceto says in the end that, if I'm praying and if I'm asking God for help and if I'm sending good thoughts, the prayer will come out through me mixed with my personal magnetism. So a prayer, it's not, when it comes, the results come from God and go through a person to help another individual. My magnetism, if the response from God comes through me, will come from me also. So it will mix these energies that are coming from the prayer, from God, from the spiritual realm, mixed with my energies, and then will come out to help. The same way that we just saw in the spiritual realm, right? The white flakes came from heavens, went through the bodies of those spirits who were praying, and out of those spirits came out colorful, right? And that's what Aniceto will explain to us right now. If we think of physics, the physics of light, for example, when all the lights of different color, they join themselves, the ray of light that comes from all the colors mixed together is a white light, right? So once we decompose a white light, then it can become blue, red, yellow, green, orange, pink, and so on and so forth, right? So the white flakes, remember, the white flakes came all the spirits collected the white flakes, and out of those spirits came out bubbles. From each spirit came out different bubbles in sizes and also in colors. That is one of the things, one of the explanations for this is that the personal magnetism of each one of those spirits, he is or she is more trained, if we can use this word here, to, from what he receives or from what she receives of those whitish flakes, those very, very white flakes, they can take only one specific portion because that's what they already have within themselves. And then the mixture of the whitish comes out, let's say purple, comes out blue, comes out green, just as a visual image of what is this magnetism, this personal magnetism that comes from me to the other, to the suffering and to the sleeping brothers and sisters in this case here, in this specific passage of the messengers, right? So that's what Aniceto is explaining, right? And I'm going to read it the way he says it because I think it's really interesting. He says, and I quote, "The Most High granted all of us equal portions of power to help, but we spread it according to our individual ability and coloration." So, see, this individual ability and coloration is related to that personal magnetism that he was talking about. So, let's say I can, if I'm a nurse, right? But I've been treating patients that have cancer, for example, or treating patients that have problems in their hearts. I will know much more about hearts than I know about foot, for example, or than I know about fractures, or than I know about lungs. Why? Because I've been doing much more work on that area, on that front, than on another front, than on another area. So each one of us will receive the same amount of help, the same amount of power from heavens. However, we have specialities, let's say. And also, we are, let's say I started the same day as you started working at the same place, doing basically the same job. However, we have different drives, we have different needs, we are different spirits, so maybe I will learn faster or maybe I will learn slower than you, and I will give a certain type of coloration, a certain color to my work than the same thing if it was done by another person. Why? Because we have different backgrounds, a person is better than the other in that, or I study more, I study less, I read more, I read less, I pay more attention, I pay less attention than the other. So each individual is different, and that's why we see the differences in those spirits and in the colors. Aniceto mentions Ismalia and says, well, she had the broader and more universalistic sentiments. So she received it more clearly and was able to distribute it more abundantly and effectively. Why? Is it because God wanted her to do it better than the others? No, it's because she practiced more. It's because she loved more for a longer time. She is not wasting time as some of us are wasting time. And when we talk about merit, for example, right? Merit that of, I have the merit of receiving this and the other one doesn't have it. It's not because I am better or because God looks at me in a better way. It's because of the capabilities that I already received and that I already strived to work for it. So now I have more possibilities of help, possibilities of doing something. Because sometimes I see a lot of people saying that, but if you think about God as giving you something because of your merit, and what about the others? So it's not because I am I have more and God is giving me more because I have more. No, it's like Aniceto says here, he gives us all the same thing. But how do I use it? How have I been using God's gifts in my life? That's the difference, is what am I doing with the time that I have? God gives us the same time. It's 24 hours a day for every single creature in this planet. Not a minute more, not a minute less, not a second more, not a second less. Every day is the same amount of time. What are we doing with this time? This is the question. And then a person that doesn't use it well, that wastes time by doing stuff that is unproductive, will not be able to learn the same way that a person that doesn't waste time. And once I learned more, it is natural that I will be able to perceive more and to do more with what I receive. But instead of doing, I prefer to complain, as usually is, right? He says, God doesn't satisfy, doesn't come or doesn't live to satisfy our personal complaints, our personal whims. No, he will do whatever he can to help us. But we need to turn to him and say, God, I am ready to help you. So please allow me to see that you're trying to help me and allow me to do something. And he will give us something to work on. But then after he gives us, I will have to do it, right? Otherwise, it would be just him doing everything, and he doesn't do it. He wants us to work because that's our task in the creation. If we are in, we're created in image, with God as an image of ourselves, we need to do what he does. And what does he do? He works. And what do I want to do? I want to rest and allow and let him do all the work. That's not how it's supposed to be. We need to work. Right? Aniceto says, all our reasonable desires and impulses are answered by the paternal blessings of the Eternal One. All the reasonable desires and impulses, right? They will all be answered, but they need to be reasonable. Sometimes we don't want to do anything. This is not reasonable, right? We need to do our part. We really need to do our part. Because otherwise, we're going to be idle just like those who are sleeping once they died. And he finalizes this part by saying that we need to realize that for those answers, the answers to the prayers that we make, God uses all those who carry the light of goodness within them, or who have merit and confidence to offer aid in his name. How do I have merit and confidence? I can only have merit and confidence if I keep working all the time. If I don't work, if I don't do anything, how will I show God that I am ready to do something for him? I remember Jesus, for example, when he came, and God sent Jesus to work, and God sent Jesus to teach us how to do it. And what did he do? He preached. He helped. He was there for friends. He was there for us at all times. He never defended himself in terms of, God will save me from this. No, I will do it. I came here to do it, and I will do it. I came here to fulfill the law. I didn't come to set the law aside and create something. No, I came here to fulfill God's will. And how does God only give Jesus this opportunity? No, he gives us all the opportunity, the same opportunity. But how come only Jesus was able to do it? Well, he was the one who had more merit and confidence. What does that mean? Well, that means that Jesus was able to live his life the way that God asked him to do it. And he did what he needed to do it. And that's his merit. That's what he needed to do it, to conform to God's will. Once we do the prayer, right? Our Holy Father, that Jesus taught us, right? We say, please God, do your will, not my will. So, but we tend to ask to look at what we see in our lives as if God needs to do whatever I want God to do. And no, sometimes it's not what God will do it. Because most of the times, or sometimes, our prayers, what we ask, are not reasonable desires and are not reasonable impulses. So I will not receive. And once I have the light of goodness within myself, and once I have acquired through my work and through that light that I allow to come from within, I have the merit and the confidence to work, I will be able to do it. But to get there, I need to start moving. I will only learn how to ride a bicycle if one day I decide to actually ride the bicycle, right? In the beginning, we'll have those secondary wheels to protect me from falling. One day, those wheels will need to come off, and I will fall. This I guarantee. We will fall. But if I want to ride the bike, if I want to be good at riding a bicycle, I will need to keep putting the effort to do it. And a person will say, oh, he is perfect when riding a bicycle. He has, God gave him that ability. Well, God gave us all the ability. But he decided to get the ability and put it to use. I decided not to use that ability. But maybe I have another ability that I can use, and then I will have a confidence. I'll have the merit. And if I allow myself, I'll have the light of goodness within me to offer aid in God's name. Aniceto's explanations opened up new arenas of meditation for me, says Andre. But he had not finished the lesson. And after a long pause, he concluded, Andre tells us. And then Aniceto will finalize this chapter by saying something that I already mentioned before, right? Naturally, because I read and I decided to make a comment on it before the end, but I'll get to it again. Aniceto tells us, since you have joined me in a course of helpful service, I hope that you will make the most of this lesson. This is our hope here at Kardec Radio as well. And our hope not only for you guys who are listening to us right now, but our hope for ourselves too, for me, for Francisca, for Vanessa, for Sergio, for everybody that does Kardec Radio, that we are the ones who are also listening to these lessons, and that when we join and when we decided to join this in this course of helpful service, that we are the ones also and as well that are making the most out of these lessons, and in this specific case, out of this lesson. And he makes a summary of what happened, right? There were almost 2,000 sleeping patients. Only 400, because of their situation, were able of being helped. And out of those 400, and only among those 400, only a few others were able to being helped even more specifically, because they had the bigger chance to improve at that specific moment. But out of those 400, only two actually got up. And when they got up, they were still in a deeply disturbed state. It is not for us, Andre. And I'm going to read the last the ending of this paragraph, because I like the way Aniceto says it, right? But it is not for us, Andre, to forget this lesson. Please, let's remember this lesson. Out of 2,000 sleeping patients, only 2 got up after a lot of time of trying to help them. And even so, when they got up, they were still, and they still are, in a deeply disturbed state. Aniceto, and I'm going to quote here, let us all do good without being anxious about it. Let us sow it always and everywhere, but let's not get stuck by demanding results. The farmer can sow his seed at will and wherever he wants, but he must realize that the germination, growth, and results belong to God. What we are doing here at Kardec Radio, not only for those, like I said before, who are listening to us, but for ourselves, is the work of the farmer. We are sowing the seeds of love, of understanding, of eternal life, of a better perception of the world. And we are striving to sow the best that we can within ourselves and for you guys who are listening. However, it is not for us to say when it's done and when the seed will germinate, will grow, and what are the results of that sowing. Right? Like when Jesus tells us a farmer was sowing, right? The sower was sowing the seeds. Some seeds fell at this type of soil, some seeds fell at those types of soil, and some seeds fell on good ground. When those seeds germinated, the plants that came gave different numbers of fruits, different types, not different types of fruits, but a different amount of fruits. Why? Because every one of us and each one of us is different. Let's not get anxious, but let's not as well forget to put these teachings into practice. If we are called to help people, let's not expect and let's not demand results from what we are doing. Let's keep doing our job the best that we can. Let us sow it always and everywhere. But let's not demand results from the seeds. Let's not demand results from the people. Let's do good without expectation. And without expectation, I hope, sincerely hope, that I will see you again next week at the same time at Kardec Radio for another chapter of The Messengers in Our Home. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.